false, think, imagine, fantasize within this realm. Our conversation, all of our languages, mathematics, and so forth are all functions of the sixth consciousness. That isn't to say that the seventh and eighth aren't operative. They're very powerfully operative, but we're not aware of them. So they have this kind of power over us that sometimes we get glimpses or feel that they're operating, but we never really, or seldom ever just directly look at them squarely. However, he's saying when you apply yourself in this practice, particularly the meditation practice, you will then go into them. And he's saying very importantly not to then mistake these states for something that they aren't. Now, let's see where we are tonight. We ended up with the layer of consciousness, right? The cave of ignorance. So he's saying in the direct, what he's calling the direct realization, there's a deep and shallow level to it. In the deep level, you're really going at it very directly, not in stages, not provisionally. And if you do everything correct, and I would say you have Shangun in Chinese. These are wholesome roots of goodness. If your roots of goodness, your repository, your wherewithal that you just bring in, it's your natural kind of, I wouldn't say even blessings, it's just a natural disposition of fullness that you have. If those are pretty rich, you just move along almost effortlessly. It's almost like a current is carrying you when you begin your practice. And you meet with very few obstacles, because the obstacles are just manifestations of past karma. But because your roots of goodness in the way are stronger and stronger over time, you just melt through the stuff and you move on. You're unfazed. And so this is why the direct realization is not said to be sort of a different kind of realization than the one that's gradual, but rather it's a measure of the person cultivating it. They can go at it more directly because they have a certain strength. Their faculties are really sharp. Whereas somebody else who's obstructed by past karma and klesha goes at it in a more indirect way, or seemingly more gradual, because it fits and starts. It doesn't have the power to penetrate. It's sort of like, I think Confucius had a statement that this way is universally the same. But some people are almost born with the inclination to it and arrive at it almost spontaneously. Others have to study for a while and painstakingly get there, and some it takes their whole lifetime and they only get a glimpse. But he says once they arrive, it's the same. But the speed or the unobstructedness that you approach it is very different from person to person. So then he says that's that direct. This awakening demonstrates what he calls here the highest faculties and the deepest realizations. The shallow, on the other hand, now the shallow direct. So he's saying direct has two. There's a direct that you're going at it directly, but it's shallow in the sense that it takes you a while to get into that immediate depth. And now we start tonight's text. He says, here, is that where we are? Okay, here, when you're doing that route, you need only worry about quitting too soon, or we could translate becoming complacent. Why would that happen? It's just an interesting question. If based on what I just said, the direct, the deep, you're moving right along unimpeded. This one that's a little more slow or gradual, you could become worried and quit, or you could become complacent because you don't feel like you're making progress. You're not, and especially if you're watching somebody who's got those good roots come in and they go, wow, yeah, got it, and they're off. And the teacher says, wow, they just realized the first stage of our hot chip. Huh? How did that happen? And you can be discouraged by that, or you can make advances. You can make progress for a week or two, or a month or two, or even a year or two. And then those unresolved seeds come up, these obstacles come up, and you think, oh, God, it's not working. I'm just going to lay down here and stop. Or you become complacent in the sense that it's just gradual, steady kind of progress, and you don't really exert yourself much. You just sort of think, well, I'll get eventually, I'll get there, and I'll just sort of take my time, no hurry. Everything's cool. So that can happen when you do the more graduated one. He says also, I like this word dawdling. Do you know what dawdle means? It's a word that's used to scold children. I never got accused of dawdling because I was the other way around. I had to be restrained. But my sister was a dawdler. And the dawdler was time for vacation. Everybody runs out. They're in the station wagon ready to go. And where's Kathy? She's in the bathroom. She hasn't decided what swimming suit to bring. And then, you know, she just kind of lackadaisically comes out. That's dawdling, just excessively taking your time. Lingering is another good word here. So avoid dawdling or lingering in the play of light and shadow outside the door. We left it poetic. We didn't translate it. Going back to what we were talking about last couple of weeks, that sometimes the imagery, the figurative imagery, is much more descriptive, much more telling than if we translate it to abstraction. So the light and shadow playing outside the gate, outside the door, this is talking about you're in the eighth consciousness, you're at the door of the eighth consciousness, but all of a sudden it's just like this huge mall with all this entertainment. And instead of just going through the mall to the other side, you kind of start going down the different pathways, stopping in the stores, and every store has some button you can push to get something going. And all of a sudden, you end up dawdling outside because the states of consciousness, it's very interesting. Some of these are unpleasant. Some of these produce a great deal of remorse and regret. And some of them are even too hard to face because they have to do with recollections or insights into not only how you've wasted yourself, but you've wasted others and done things in your, this is what's coming out of that eighth consciousness. But on the other hand, some of these states are just exquisitely wild and exciting, and you can see your past lives really clearly. For example, you can, even some of these states, you can see and know the thoughts of others. You can have experiences of bliss and enjoyment that makes every pleasure in the world just seem like chewing wax by comparison. No, I'm being serious with you. Once you taste that kind of stuff, it's really easy to let go of the desires of this world because they aren't that desirable anymore. When you get into this state of meditation, where all pain ceases, and it's called dhyana bliss, the duration and the intensity of this is so alluring, so attractive, that you really don't want to hear that bell. And when it comes, it's like, what? Oh, that much time has passed. So that's why people that get into this will meditate for hours, sometimes days on end, because it seems like time flies by. It doesn't seem like time's an issue at all. And so that's why, this idea that you're renouncing something, it's actually not renouncing. You're not attracted to these other things at all. This replace. Now, the problem with that is some of these things can become so attractive and so enticing that you start to then dawdle and linger over those. Okay, so you can sink into them in a sort of melancholy kind of negative way, fear, apprehension, disgust, worry, anxiety, or you can sink into them by just ascending and attraction, and it's the same thing of grasping, either hanging on to or rejecting. So that's why we lead the play of light and shadow, light being the more positive, uplifting, and literally sometimes light. You sometimes, in fact, see lights, and you can see the lights or the lights that certain people emit. So if you encounter someone who's a very severe cultivator, a sage even, you will see that their light is just, I mean, it makes a Christmas tree look like a dark hole. Okay? And, but the shadow is the other side you can see as well. So this is talking about something that's both internal and external. I go back to this. It's not that all of a sudden the boundary of this dissolves. Okay, so we're talking about, again, I'm saying a distributed consciousness. It's not my consciousness looking at outside. You all of a sudden see the porousness of consciousness itself, and the boundaries between inside and outside start breaking down, and you're exposed to all of these different realms and states. As surely as we see each other in this room. Not like, oh, let's say I'm going to have an altered state. No. It's like, boom, it's right there before your eyes. The Buddha said like an apple seen in the palm of your hand. So when this happens, that's the light, that's the dark. Otherwise, he said, you won't be able to completely, entirely break through the eighth consciousness because you're hanging in there. Any breakthroughs you have will still be at the borders of consciousness. You'll just be on the fringe of this, but you're not really going right through. And then this wonderful expression here, if you regard them as true and genuine, you're mistaking a thief for your child. Now, this again is a, what do you call this? It's like a colloquial expression, a literary colloquialism, mistaking a thief for your child. Does that mean anything to you? The current thing that happens with people that have guns in their house, they mistake their child for a thief and shoot them. No, seriously, this happens. The opposite is being talked about here. You take the thief to be your own child. There's wonderful literary pieces like this. I'm trying to think of one I just saw recently from South Africa, where somebody feigns to be the lost father of this girl. This girl was born, raised by her mother, never met her father. Mother dies. The girl goes on, becomes very wealthy and successful, and then all of a sudden her father shows up after all these years. And her poor father is infirm and out of sorts and needs a lot of attention. And so she starts to lavish upon him all these wonderful gifts that she's accumulated. And even goes to the lawyer to change her will because she didn't think she had any heirs. But she does. She has her father here who's pretty good. It looks like he might outlive her and so forth. And of course, the hero of the story it gets a little suspicious of this and starts to investigate. It's just a scam. It's not really her father. It's a thief. So this is a kind of example where you mistake the thief for your child, or you mistake the thief as your own kin. And sometimes this expression is used also in Buddhism. Anybody know the other expression? Thief, again, is the colloquial. It's called the thief within the virtue, the thief within the goodness. What is it? Okay, gungda, meaning virtue. The thief in the virtue. What is that talking about? Any guesses? Do you remember when we did the Platform Sutra, the Sixth Patriarch, and Prefect Wei asks the Sixth Patriarch, he says, aren't you the same teaching as Bodhidharma? That's right. Well, when Bodhidharma came to China, he encountered Liang Wudi, this emperor, and the emperor had created all this merit and virtue by building temples and monasteries, sponsoring ordination and huge vegetarian feast and so forth. And he asked Bodhidharma, so I got a lot of gungda, huh? I got a lot of merit and virtue. And Bodhidharma's response was, let me calculate, let's see. And he said, no, you don't have any. Whoa, and he got very upset. And so the Prefect Wei is asking the Sixth Patriarch, how could that be? He did all this good stuff and he didn't have any merit and virtue. And he said, well, because he did it so as to look good, if you want to, And so the thief within the virtue is this hidden intention you have that you're doing something that's seemingly good, but your ulterior motive is to get something back, either materially or even in terms of reputation and fame. So you became known as the great donor of Berkeley Buddhist Monastery or something, right? Or, the other way you do that, the thief in the virtue is, I can remember as a monk, some people come up with these huge red envelopes. And it was to be at special times. Ulaanbaatar was one time or whatnot. And they make these hongbao, these red envelope offerings. It's a Chinese Buddhist kind of thing. So you don't just give them the money. You put the money in a cute little red envelope, sometimes literally cute, like a Hello Kitty type of envelope. And then those times the monks have the big sleeves. And so, and it's gone. You didn't even see it. And it just drops down the sleeves. And they go walking out with these huge sleeves full of red envelopes. Especially Chinese New Year is the one that you got to watch out for. But see, some people will come and just give you an envelope and it's kind of flat. And then other people will come with this bigger envelope. So you can get them different sizes. And the bigger the size, the more merit and virtue. And then if you stuff it, it looks like really. And instead of just handing you hold it up to your forehead like this. So everybody sees, and then you hand out this big red envelope. That's the thief within the virtue. You're hoping that others will notice and think favorably of you, that you're really generous. Often, when we didn't keep the envelopes ourselves, we just put them all into the kitty and then turned them over to the general fund for the monastery. But sometimes after you'd open those envelopes, and the one that was thin, may have $1,000 check or something in it, and then the one that was stuffed was all singles, So it's like a double thief within the virtue. You pretended, but and in fact it was just. So this idea regarding the thief for your child is taking these states to be something genuine and true, when in fact they're actually robbing you of your consciousness. And so we have a verse here. The text goes on to say, an ancient said, we don't know who this is. There's a lot of verses that come down to us where we don't know the origins. They've just become part of I would say the tradition. And they'll just say an ancient said, or there's a verse. And it's really hard if you try to search this out to find out where they come from. Sometimes they're based on text. And sometimes people wrote them on rocks or trees. They had some experience and they wrote on and they didn't say, because the thief within the virtue, written by me, copyright, blah, blah, blah. They just wrote it out for the edification of others. And so sometimes we have these verses and we don't know where they came from. This might be a case in point. It's an old one. He says, cultivators of the way, this is our translation, cultivators of the way fail to see what's true. Instead, or clinging to their shifting consciousness. So consciousness here is rendered as this kind of shifting, unstable domain or dimension. It's as your thoughts, they just come and go. I mean, if I asked you how many thoughts did you have today, roughly? A lot, right? And could you kind of reconstruct those for me? No, what was the first and second, third thought you got up in the morning? What was the thought you just had 2 minutes ago? And so what shifting conscious means, that's the nature of consciousness. It's like wave after wave after wave, and you can't remember any of them. And the whole day goes by, your mind filled with this stuff, and at the end, there's not one maybe there's one or two that you can sort of recall. But next day, there'll be just and day after day, it's just like dental floss. Just in and out. So shifting consciousness refers to this. We're caught up in this. We feel it's powerful. We feel our thoughts and our emotions and feelings are really this big drama. But in fact, it's just a shifting play of light and shadow and consciousness. Then it says, mistaking a pretender for their true self. And this goes back to the thief. For limitless kalpas, kalpa being... Yeah, a very long, long time. There's small kalpas, there's middle kalpas, and then there's great kalpas. So, I mean, if you really get into the math, the Sanskrit math of this, it's kind of interesting. But a small kalpa, I think, is 1,000 to the 10th power. That's the smallest. So whatever, figure that out. And then, like 10,000 or 1,000,000 of those make up an intermediate kalpa. And then 20 million of those make up a great kalpa. Yeah, you've already lost, you're right. But what's interesting about this, they do this time because it's actually actual time, according to some measure. And also, it's to blow your mind a little bit. You're thinking, gee, my birthday's coming up, and it's like, well, 1,000 years and a 10, that's a kalpa. I'm not that old. And yet it's also to show that this consciousness, this samsaric consciousness goes on limitless kalpas. So this idea of this turning, they're root-bound in birth and death. This is the measure that's used, this continual coming and going in confusion driven by one's karma is said to happen over limitless kalpas. This is an interesting reflection. So this life, according to, just from one, this life, according to this, isn't even a blip on the radar screen. We have this life, that life, life after life after life, into kalpas. We're just continuing turning, root-bound, because we can't penetrate this. So this is really interesting, and when you start to look at time from the Dharmic perspective, and the best text I know that discusses this is the Avatamsaka Sutra. And the Avatamsaka Sutra basically says the only time measure that is at all significant in counts is consciousness itself. If consciousness changes, that's a measure of something. If consciousness doesn't change, it's just limitless kalpas going on in this repetitive pattern. There is no time, really. You're stuck in this loop. And the only change, the only time you make some movement out of that is when the consciousness itself has a change of heart. And then there's some real measure of something happening. Otherwise, it's just measureless. It's trackless. They're really interesting. And therefore it says, when, and this is from the Avatamsaka preface, somebody who in their search is brought to that point where they make that change, it says, it's like looking through a keyhole and seeing boundless space, and now one time is all time, and one place is every place. So someone who has broken through, then one time is all time, and one place is every place. And that's a pretty interesting idea of liberation, because what it's saying is, oh, you don't end birth and death, but you're no longer controlled by that cycle. It's a very interesting way of looking at it. So you can relax. You should relax right now, because this time is all time. Did you realize that? And this place is every place. So where do you want to go? No? Well, you want to go there? It's the same place. When do you want to go? It's the same time. Yeah, pretty cool. Not good for the travel agencies, but this is good. Okay, now before I go on, I thought tonight what I'd like to do is to do a little case study, if you won't mind. In other words, we've talked about this vaguely, and you all have states that you probably triggered up as we were talking about this, you've had in meditation, yes? Have any of you had any states in meditation that would qualify as light and shadow here? Anything? Come on, nobody?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah? Okay. Yes?
Nothing on the past legislature.
No, we're not going big league here. We're just little state. And it passed or whatnot, right? Yeah, okay. So what I wanted to do was to actually take you to a autobiographical account of somebody who deeply went into this meditation practice. And we're going to go through this, and we won't finish it tonight, but I want to start because it's an actual kind of historical account of his experiences in this kind of thing. It's a perfect illustration of what we have. So if we bring up visions of samadhi, visions in samadhi, that's the latest one I sent you. Got it? Okay, so we go back. Some of you may be familiar with this text, some of you might not be. This is a biographical account recorded by somebody else of this monk talking about his life, laying it out. His name is Ajahn Mun, M-U-N. And Ajahn Mun, anybody know his time when he was? Well, there we go. He was in all time, that's true. And tonight, he's in our time, because we're bringing him back through this. But is actual historical time? Yeah, late 19th. He was born in 1870, and he died in 1949. So almost, 80 years. His autobiography, is really interesting because he's considered by many to be the founder of what's called the forest tradition, the Thai forest tradition. Now, there were monks doing this, but he was the one that really systematized it and then took on disciples that continued it up to the Theravada forest monks we know now, Sayadaw Abhayagiri, are actually sort of descendants of that tradition. There were two traditions in the Thai. One is the forest, and they called the other one the city tradition. But the forest tradition is distinguished because it tried to go back to what they saw were the basics of cultivating simplicity, a kind of rigorous asceticism close to nature, away from the comforts of the city. So they would go into the forest and build these little kutis and live in the forest, and it was pretty rough. A lot of animals, snakes, and insects in the Thai forest. If you've been to Southeast Asia, you know what I'm talking about. Even if you go to a temple in Southeast Asia. I mean, you see any geckos growing in the walls here? I don't know. So I remember my first temple, I was in Kuala Lumpur, an old temple down in the market area, and I was like, wow, the old temple, this is cool. But then when I tried to sleep, Hunter and I were at night trying to sleep, we were kind of sleeping here, and these geckos, these cling to the wall, and they're going back and forth chasing the bugs, which are everywhere, right? And then you feel this, the rats going over your legs, you know. So, yeah, all night long. And a gecko would drop down and plop on your chest and scurry away. So, and the spiders, we're not talking about the itsy bitsy spider that went up the water spout. We're talking about spiders the size of your hand. You know, and so you're sitting in meditation, all of a sudden the spider's on your shoulder. Right. So this is the forest tradition, and this is why they take up what's called the Dhutanga practices. These are 12 or 13 ascetic practices that have to do. Anybody know some of the Dhutanga practices? Yeah, being a house for spiders of your body. No. Okay, 1 meal a day at noon, never lying down to sleep, never staying in one place more than 3 nights, living out underneath a tree. One of the more advanced one is living in a charnel ground or a cemetery as a contemplation. It's one of the more advanced Dhutanga. Only eating one bowl. So you eat once a day, but then you only eat the one bowl. Right? So this is a Dhutanga. These are ascetic practices meant to subdue the passions and the senses and get mastery over your body and so forth. So the forest monks then took up this practice. So when you see a forest monk tradition, you'll see someone who's relatively gaunt and, a little sinewy, and their clothing and their essentials are pretty rough. So often they have patched robes, because one of the Dhutangas is they go out to where the clothes are thrown away, and they just take patches from the clothes and sew together their robe. So they don't even take a new robe, they take patched robes. So sometimes even in the Chinese tradition, you'll see monks or nuns with these patches on their robes. It's a carryover of this Dhutanga practice. In other words, I get this one robe, I'm going to keep this robe for a long, long time. I'm not going to waste. And there's a wonderful story in one of the early texts that describe one of the Buddha's disciples of going through the robe, and then when it was like nothing left, instead of throwing it away, he made it stitched into a rug for a sitting mat. So I've got rugs from my mother where she crochet and take old cloths and things like my sister's dresses and whatnot, and she crocheted them into a rug. So I can remember her doing it. This wasn't Dhutanga practice. This was just called a child of the Great Depression. So anyway, so these are Dhutanga cultivators. And let's start tonight, and we'll just go into it. This section appears early on. I've just cut and pasted some of this because I wanted to bring out a feel, and I'll kind of read it slowly and we'll talk about it. So visions and samadhi. What's samadhi? It can be a meditative absorption. Some people say it's a sort of a withdrawal of ordinary consciousness from the sense objects into an inner focus concentration. So it's used in different ways. It's used to talk about a staged process of stilling the mind through stopping thoughts and fixating on an object of contemplation. That's the Jur of Jurguan. Okay, that's an initial stage of meditation. The next is the contemplating and then using that platform of stopping or stillness to then deepen your contemplation and breakthrough of the nature of reality. So it's a combination. Stopping is the fixing of the mind, and that sometimes is called one of the absorptions or samadhis. And then there's stages of this. That's one level. In another level, we've been talking about samadhi is a state of mind that is 24/7. This is called the dasanme, and you neither enter it nor you leave it. So with these samadhis, you go, you have your lunch, throw water on your face, you go under your tree, put your mosquito netting down, and then you sit. And as you still your breath and your consciousness and so forth, you enter into this state of deep concentration, undisturbed tranquility called samadhi. And then after a certain amount of time, you come out of that and you go about and you go back and forth. That's this samadhi. He's not talking about here the great samadhi, which is the realization of the Buddha. Okay, so he says he's now gone off into the forest basically on his own because there isn't much of a tradition now. So this guy's got courage, guts. He knows what he wants to do. He goes off into the forest, and we're talking about real forest now in Thailand in the probably the 1890s. This is certainly pre-development. One day while using Buddha, this is his meditation, Buddho, as his meditation point of focus or topic, at this place, Wat Liab, his mind became calm. There appeared an image. Okay, now here's the state, right? There appeared an image. It doesn't say whether it's that an internal image or an external image. Okay, it just says he appeared an image. What was the image? Of a bloated, festering corpse. With vultures, crows, and dogs scrambling after it in front of him, tearing it to pieces and scattering it all over. Whoa. So there you're sitting. Everything's cool, you're in samadhi, and it's not just a imaginary thing that he's doing. He's like, you can imagine something, right? You can sit there, close your eyes, and imagine something from, a horror film, and then you can stop. This appeared before him, so this is something he beheld. He felt a strong feeling of disgust and weariness. After the mind had withdrawn from this meditation image, he regularly kept it in his mind's eye during every moment of the night and day, be it walking, standing, sitting, or lying down. Okay, so what's going on here?
He's using it as a meditation tool.
He's using it somehow, okay? So he's actually, now you have to remember, later we'll get to this, he's doing this raw, so to speak. He doesn't have a teacher. And because of his background, he hasn't studied. So he's going in to do the meditation practice on his own. He has the concentration abilities to enter this state, to enter this samadhi, but then this image appears. What is he to do with it? So what he does is he thinks it, and the word is used, namitta. Namitta means like a sign, like an omen, So this namitta, and this is one of the things that you caution, my teacher cautions about all the time, do not seek for namitta, signs and omens and, marks of something, because you will get them. So here, we don't know, we can assume that he was trying to accomplish something with his meditation, and then this appeared, and then it said, walking, standing, sitting, even lying down, meaning when he was asleep, he kept this disgusting, wearisome image in his mind. The meditation sittings that followed were also based on the corpse. So he took this as his new meditation focus. Continued contemplation on the corpse transformed it into a glass disc floating in front of him. Whoa. You imagine this in a movie, right? You render this in a movie. This is pretty. Now, you're sitting there, what would you do? A lot better than TV. You got a glass disc floating in front of you. With further contemplation, the disc became an endless panorama of a variety of objects and scenes, there being apparently an inexhaustible pattern of changes as a result of his chase or curiosity, his insatiable desire to see what would come next. Okay? Wow. You see what's going on here, right? So he's sitting, state comes, he stays with it, and now it starts to transform. He's not directing it, it's just transforming. And he's doing more than observing. You're right, he's observing. But he is chasing it. That's what the words he uses here. He's actually like, here's something. Now, sometimes people sit, and the initial stage that they get in before they can actually subdue the mind is boredom. Because the hyper mind is so used to, so you sit and there's nothing going on. So you create this kind of stuff. And it's no longer boring. But in a sense, you're addicted now because he says insatiable desire. Now, right away, that's a cue. Insatiable desire in any stage of meditation or any stage of cultivation is something to be wary of. It's different than the aspiration for Bodhi. This is insatiable desire to see what would come next. And I've seen this happen in meditation sessions. Once you get hooked on this, it's like you can't wait. You even maybe have a little trailer in your last meditation thing of what's coming next. You're so looking, you can't wait to sit again because all these states start to come up. One moment, here we go, he appeared to be climbing a high mountain. Then he saw himself carrying a sword, then wearing a pair of shoes, walking back and forth on the mountain. At another moment, there appeared before him a wall with a door. Isn't this great? I mean, this is like, wow. Because you've seen images like this. I've seen renders of fantasies where somebody's walking through the woods and suddenly there's a door there. And you're going, what's they going to do? Are they going to, because there's no house, it's just a door in the woods. Are they going to open the door and go through it? He opened the door and saw a few bhikshus meditating inside. So he opens the door and there's a bunch of monks sitting in meditation. Then the scene widened to snow cliffs and caves nearby, some with hermits inside. Still at another moment he saw what seemed to be a cradle or basket being lowered from the cliff. He saw himself get into the basket and being lifted up to the precipice, and there he saw a big boat with a square table in it. That's pretty wild stuff. The mountain was surrounded by a bright light. And so at this page, when you're doing this, you're all going, I wonder what that means. I wonder what that means. You know, am I being lifted up to the heavens? Is the bright light of my nature coming? Blah, 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 blah. You go on. Then he saw himself having a meal on the mountain. Such was how the ever-changing panorama unfurled itself before him, leading him nowhere. We'll go on just for a little bit here. For 3 months, an endless and indescribable pattern of change occurred during meditation with no end in sight. In other words, once he turned this screen on, and once he started to chase this, it supplied him with an endless stream of entertainment. And I would guess from some of it was very frightening, and some of it was extremely flattering and even enjoyable. The inward result was far from satisfactory. I underline this section. After such a sitting, the mind was just as susceptible to intruding and distracting influences, driving him to spasmodic joys and sorrows as before. In other words, he had enough wherewithal to say, wait, this is pretty much what I do before I was a monk, before I meditated. Spasmodic joys and sorrows, ups and downs. I'm watching, let's see, what was it? The last event. Was it the World Series or the Super Bowl or something? And Comcast had a blackout. And right in the height, and the bases loaded, 2, 3 full count, television goes down. So you're there with spasmodic joy before, and now it goes out in spasmodic sorrow. By the way, this is often what precedes domestic violence, both in Europe and the United States. In other words, people are watching TV, and they're into it, and suddenly the TV goes out for some reason, or somebody comes in and says, time for dinner, and they get so angry at being interrupted in this kind of samadhi that they actually turn to violence. And if their team loses, even more so. This is I'm just saying very interesting. So he's saying, wait a minute, I've been doing this for 3 months, and my mind is as before. In other words, instead of calm and tranquility, I'm just going up and down now in meditation. He could gain no poise or balance from his meditation. He was then convinced that this was certainly not the right path leading to deliverance. Otherwise, poise and peace of mind, not this emotional sensitivity, would have been the result. This is very interesting. One of the markers you can use of whether you're cultivating properly, if I can use that word, is that you stop having the spasmodic joys and sorrows. You stop so much up and down. And the emotional sensitivity does not mean you have compassion. That's a sensitivity. That's a sensibility. Compassion is a sensibility to really feel one with someone else and know what they're feeling. This emotional sensitivity, which we would call, when I was working in psychiatry, labile. Labile means subject to fits, ups and downs, and wild mood swings that have very little to do with the actual reality around you. You known anybody like this? Yeah, not us, but we've known people a little edgy, ups and downs. But this can happen in meditation. So you see somebody in meditating, and they all of a sudden have this emotional sensitivity, this vibe. And it's because they've caught the state. This kind of sensitivity, he thought, can be expected of an ordinary person who knows nothing of mind development. It is certain, he concluded, this chase or directing the attention towards external objects and events was against the principle of mind development, cultivation, thus depriving him of the inward bliss and peace that should have been expected. There's a double thing going on here. On one hand, he knows that this is off because his emotional response is off. On the other hand, you also see the little bit of seeking here of the expectation of the bliss and peace. So when you read like the Platform Sutra, you'll notice there's no section in there where the sixth patriarch says, if you meditate, you will get bliss and peace. In fact, he does quite the opposite. So again, this is rich. I think we'll stop here for tonight. Well, let's finish this section here. There's only one paragraph. Thenceforward, he reversed his focus of attention and bringing back to the body, making it traverse the whole body in different planes or dimensions, vertically and horizontally, upwards and downwards and sideways, always under the scrutinizing eye of mindfulness. But most of the time was spent in walking meditation. During his occasional meditation sittings, he did not allow the mind to retreat to the condition of one-pointedness, but it had regularly contemplated the various parts of the body. The period of sleep was also preceded by meditation based on the body. In other words, he went back to a meditation topic that was looking at the body, examining the body. Now, sometimes this is as simple as what of this body is real and permanent. You can do that as a meditation. So you say, well, the eyes are not permanent, the ears are not permanent, the tongue is not permanent, the skin is not permanent. All this is a thing in flux. So the contemplation of the body at one stage can be simply asking, what about this body endures that goes on? Then the next stage of that be, well, where is that me then in that body? But these are different ways of focusing meditation. So he's going back, I'm not sure which one he's using, but he's using the body as meditation. But this doesn't stop here. This gets even more interesting as he goes on. So if you're interested in this as a case study, we'll continue this next week. Okay? Good. Questions? Yes?
So it seems sort of odd that he went on by contemplating the corpse, given that you were just describing a Vipassana practice where you meditate and internalize. He had this perfect memento mori for his contemplation. So where exactly did he veer off course? Was it like chasing sentiment?
Well, okay, that's a very good question. When you do the Dhutanga practice of contemplating, you're contemplating the stages of decay of a corpse. So it's a very systematic and regimented, and I won't say regimented, but it's a systematic, disciplined contemplation. In other words, you start that contemplation, okay, so we're, well, first of all, this is not recommended for beginners, so just, okay. This Dhutanga practice is for advanced. Why? Because the emotional stability, if it's not strong enough, can freak out and go wrong contemplating corpse. Any of you have been to a funeral where you see a dead body, know what I'm talking about. If you were to sit in front of that dead body for 6 months in meditation constantly, whoa, you better have some real gung fu. Okay? So, and this is done outside, and those charnel grounds are not like Forest Lawn in Los Angeles. You know, there's nice grass and flowers underneath, and you're thinking, I wonder what the body's doing. Oh, it's no, it's right there in front of you. So when you're contemplating the corpses, you're going to the old burial grounds in the traditional way, where the corpses were often just put out and left au naturel to return, which meant jackals and crows and so on and so forth came and tore it apart. And even if it didn't, it would then bloat, open up. I mean, I'm just going through some of this, right? I don't want to get into detail here, but you're watching it go through those stages naturally. And in doing that with the systematic thing, you realize I am contemplating this. And I am in control of this in the extent that I am observing this from this position that is happening. And I'm using this contemplation to also reflect this is the nature of all conditioned things. The human body will do this eventually. My body will do this eventually. So you're breaking your attachment to your physical identity as a permanent, lasting thing. That's very different and has a beginning, has a middle, and has an end. And often it's monitored by your teacher. So the teacher will come by and say, you know, how's it going? Really good, really good. Nope, quit, time to go. It's like, whoa, man, the bugs. No, okay. But you can say, no, it's at this stage. Oh, okay, that's fine. And like a little back and forth. But when a state like this comes to you, and it's not part of a disciplined meditation topic, but something that just appears, that's a different contemplation. And you notice what happened. He didn't stay with the contemplation. It started to drift to the disc and then to something else because his mind was chasing after an altered state of consciousness as opposed to using the contemplation in a controlled way to watch almost clinically, if you will, scientifically, the stages of decay. And sometimes this is done, you go and then you come back and you observe now it's just bones. And then you come back even later and the bones turn to ashes. And so you can actually use this over an extended period of time as a contemplation of impermanence. Okay, so the difference is, one, it's not sought after as a special state, it's part of a systematic contemplation, whereas this one came as a state to an unaware, unprepared, but insatiably eager mind to have states. So it's a very different. Intent is probably the most important thing here. And then response. Because you can be sitting and something can come, and you didn't intend it to come. Now, maybe secretly you wanted something to happen. Come on, right? Oh, no, not me. I just sit. Whatever. No. People, you know, like, I want to get something, some bliss, some joy, you know, levitation. That way, okay, you know, I want to know what she's thinking, you know. You know, there's all these little stuff that you want, and then all of a sudden a state comes and you say, well, I didn't seek that. Well, the door was wide open. What did you think was going to... It's like somebody walked in. What a surprise. Leave your door open tonight, see what happens. Of course, people will walk in, states will walk in. But your response to it is critical. If you're turned by it, if you think it's something abhorrent or something really pleasant or proves something, then you've been moved by the state. So the text will describe unsolicited, unintended states arising, but you respond with a calm and even mind. All conditioned dharmas like dreams, illusions, bubbles, shadows, contemplate them thus. The state vanishes and you're fine again. And this is really what the last section of the Shrangama Sutra is about, describing the various states that can come. As long as you don't think you're enlightened or you don't get afraid, it's just you move through it and you keep moving along. So it's a good question. But I think sometimes it helps to focus on these concrete things to really sort of bring it out. But, you know, this is pretty advanced. This is not going to happen to you tonight when you go home, for sure. Okay, anything else? Yes?
When the occult becomes
Well, the first thing to stress, what's interesting about this story, and it goes on to other states he finally comes to the realization that because he didn't study the Tripitaka, he didn't study the text, and because he didn't have a Kalyana Mitra, a good mentor, he was left to his own devices here. So he really did not know what to do. And his ordinary consciousness would take over. Spasmodic joys and sorrows, up and down, chasing around, which is our ordinary consciousness because we think everything we want or need is outside. And so just as we go shopping, constantly acquiring things to fill our needs, as you do the meditation, if your consciousness is not clear about that, you will go shopping internally. And that's exactly what he did. So he used his ordinary mind, but now is on a more spiritual level. And that's exactly what he was doing. So what he should have done will come up as we go into this. He starts to realize later, because a monk does come who becomes a teacher for him a little bit and gives him some instruction. But if you've been coming to the Berkeley Buddhist Monastery for as long as you have, you would probably know right away that that disc was really something special and you should cherish. And you'd say, mine, my disc, I got it. Right? No, not. Okay? So you just realize, okay, here's another state. So what? But I tell you, it's very easy to say that, but when the state actually comes, you become Gollum. My precious. Okay. One announcement I was asked to make is the Gwyneth Chun concert that was scheduled for tomorrow has been postponed. So it's not going to occur more. I think it was at the Presbyterian Church on College. But save or keep your tickets because it will be rescheduled and the tickets will still be good. Did anybody get tickets here? I heard there were 40 tickets given out. Where? Saturday night only? Yeah, well, what about our Friday night class? We didn't get any tickets. Well, I know, but... Okay, so if you haven't got a ticket, Locke's the person to talk to. We'll do the transference in English. May every living being, our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may their minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light break the darkness of their endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. Ding Li San Bao.